As some of my fans will know, I recently attended the 2014 Calgary Expo. I mentioned the year for posterity. My trip had been months in the planning, and now that all is said and done, I can say that it was a smashing success. We arrived around midday on Thursday and went over for the evening. Mostly we were just wandering around looking at cool things, but one of my friends wanted to get Dino Gorman's autograph. While we were waiting in line, Mark Hadlow, that's Dory from the Hobbit movies, walked up behind the two women in his VIP lineup and in his own words gave him quite a fright. When we got up to Mr. O'Gorman, one of my friends purchased a photo to be signed, and then he started asking questions about the geography of Canada so he could figure out where he was. My other friend then drew up a rough map of Canada on his table. So for those of you who noticed that his table had become a little collage of doodles, we were the ones that got that started. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a picture because the expo volunteer told me that he didn't like people taking pictures of him. A bit of an unfortunate trend, that. Oh well. My other activities that day involved wandering around on my own, taking pictures of various cosplays with my phone. I also dropped by one of the armory booths and got to play around with a mace for a bit. That thing was damned heavy. I also got pictures of us posing with the Gollum statue at the Weta exhibit. On day 2 we slept in, but because we were staying at the Sheraton, we witnessed the start of the parade from the window of our room. I considered hustling into my cosplay and joining them, but laziness won out. We did, however, have a laugh at the expense of Darth Fembane and her massive rack. My one friend later joked that we could have flipped quarters into it from our window. Later on, we actually did get up and go, and that was the day I cosplayed as Darth Plagueis. I walked all the way from our hotel to the convention in costume. Got me a few strange looks on the street as I was traversing the very white-collar downtown Calgary. We arrived and I ran into a couple of co-workers who were also attending the con, then took my lightsaber to the weapon check station before entering. On this day, I met Starkiller! I brought in my copy of the Force Unleashed 2 novelization for him to sign, though retrieving it with the Darth Plagueis fingers I made was fun. Fortunately, the suffering was well worth the effort because moments later, Sam Witwer actually recognized my costume. While he signed my book, I commented on his portrayal of Palpatine in The Force Unleashed 1, how much I preferred TFU2 over TFU1, and his character in the Dragon Age tabletop game that he played with Will Wheaton. Link in the description. We had a nice chat about Palpatine's twisted psychology, and apparently his impression of Palpatine was so good that during one of the scenes where he was cackling as the Emperor, he was surprised to learn that it was actually him and not a recording of Ian McDiarmid that had been looped in. He seemed almost relieved that I preferred TFU2 over TFU1, and regarding the YouTube video of the Dragon Age game, apparently he had gone so far with the racist aspect of his character that a lot of stuff ended up getting cut. I was disappointed to learn that there wasn't an uncensored version. Because of how cumbersome the fingers on my Darth Plagueis hands were, I only took 2 pictures that day. A guy in a massive Mondo Shawan costume, an alien from the movie The Fifth Element. Otherwise, it was mostly letting other people take pictures of me. If you find any pictures of me wandering around as Darth Plagueis, please send them my way. This day was probably the most eventful for me. I dropped by the bank on the way to the con and took out a fair amount of money to pay for all the autographs I was planning on getting. First thing was Dino Gorman, getting him to sign my copy of the Creatures and Characters book for The Unexpected Journey. He actually remembered me from the other day when my friend drew the map for him, and I noticed that since then, his table had become quite a collage. We joked about the scene in The Desolation of Smaug, where the elves were searching him for weapons. Then I went into the Jed Brophy lineup, but Mark Hadlow arrived first, so I went over to his instead. Surprisingly, he also remembered me, because I was standing in the next line over on day 1 when he walked up behind the 2 women in his VIP lineup. I guess I have a very distinctive appearance. I mentioned that within my own family, I'm basically the Dory of my siblings. Nothing wrong with that. After that, I moved on to the Jed Brophy lineup. Incidentally, the picture in my book that I had him sign was actually his favorite screenshot. I asked him about the scene in Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers where he interacted with Christopher Lee, and he told me a pretty hilarious story. After Lee walked up to him and said his line, Brophy tried to reply, but his prosthetic teeth weren't glued in properly, and he ended up accidentally spitting the teeth at Saruman's chest. So Christopher Lee turned to Peter Jackson and said, "Is he quite done yet?" because he didn't understand what Brophy had said through the flying teeth. As anyone who has actually seen the movie can tell you, Brophy's line ended up being cut. Oh well. Later, I got into the Manu Bennett line and had some pleasant chats with the other people waiting until he showed up. He was cool and gave a great signature in my book. I said my bit, we shook hands, and I went on my way. Very firm handshake, by the way. Later, I got into the lineup for the Richard Taylor autograph booth, but instead he went over to the Weta exhibit and did his signings there. For free. He was pretty awesome. I got him to sign a picture of a wild-eyed dwarven miner in my book. He actually let me take a picture of him, and I went on my way. Afterwards, I went to the armory booth again and got to pose with a couple of swords. That was pretty cool. Then I happened upon a bunch of Star Wars characters posing for a group shot, Lightsiders versus Darksiders, and took a few pictures of that. I got chatting with Obi Kenobi and found out that he's a fan of my channel. Obi, I didn't get your name, but here's a shout out. Afterwards, Vikings and Orcs. First thing I did after getting a cherry lemonade was to get into the lineup for Lance Henriksen. Being the dedicated fan of all things obscure and Star Wars, I brought my copy of Tor Annihilation for him to sign, as the Jedi Master Nost Dural, whom he voiced in the Galactic Timeline videos on the Tor website, showed up in the book. Link in the description. He seemed fairly impressed by this, and he told me about some of the projects that he's working on right now, such as voicing the Master on the upcoming television series The Strain. I mentioned that I thought his voice sounded cool, and he responded by advising me to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day for 30 years. I especially enjoyed his signature, the quote being appropriate even for Star Wars as he didn't voice a human. Later, I attended the Being Human panel. So many gay jokes. Sam Witwer and Sam Huntington started things off with a mock reveal of them being a couple. I know this sounds kinda narcissistic and crazy, but I kinda hope they noticed me. I was a latecomer, I was wearing a floor-length hooded robe, it was sunny outside, and with the sun coming in through the door, I would have looked like Luke Skywalker from Return of the Jedi when he's entering Jabba's palace. Not much else happened that day. I got some pictures of various cool armored peoples and Starkiller. I got into the Adrian Paul lineup, but because he was late, I didn't actually get to see him. I had to clear out for 3 o'clock as my friends wanted to be on our way home for 3:45, and it took us about half an hour to walk back to our hotel. So, missing out on Adrian Paul was a bit disappointing, but otherwise, I accomplished everything I set out to do and then some. Not bad for a human.